That's Prime Minister Mark Carney addressing the Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly, just hours after gathered chiefs passed a resolution calling on the Prime Minister to scrap his new memorandum of understanding on energy with Alberta, a deal that could open the door to an exemption or removal of the tanker ban on the northwest coast of the country, on BC's northwest coast. So how was the Prime Minister's message received? Joining me now here in studio is the National Chief of the AFN, the Assembly of First Nations, Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak. Hi, National Chief. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to studio. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you for having us.
What were you most listening for in the Prime Minister's remarks, and did you hear it?
Yeah, look, I've been pushing him on making sure that we have a First Minister's meeting, and we got that today, so I'm thankful and I welcome that. I know there's a lot of work to do around that, but yeah, I think I'm glad for the FMM. Of course, you know, we've got outstanding issues on policing, on housing, on water, and we heard that from chiefs today on the floor.
I did very clearly hear that, because I should tell the audience, and we played much of it, but there was a 30-minute essentially question and answer portion, and the Prime Minister was on the receiving end about a lot of the outstanding issues. Like, despite the fact that he flagged, things that have been done to address them, clearly a lot of communities feel like there are still major pressing needs. How convinced are you that this version of the federal government will work hard to address them?
Well, I'm hoping that that sets the tone. I know that they keep saying they're a new government. Well, here's the Prime Minister saying that he wants to work with First Nations. So we challenge all parliamentarians to make sure that they are answering the calls when chiefs are messaging, when First Nations are reaching out, that we're trying to get this relationship into a better place. And, we have to keep working at that.
What did what has unfolded with that memorandum of understanding do to what you just described? Like, what kind of tone or substance did it impart on the hopes that you had for this relationship?
Well, I think it shows the country that, Canada, the provinces, they can make however many MOUs that they want. They can make advisory groups all that they want. They can make, major projects offices all they want. But I think one thing is clear today: you won't get around rights holders. So the most important relationship in this country, needs to be building that relationship between the foundational partners, which is First Nations people, and and the country and Canada itself. So we're here, we're ready to work. We've always worked to try and build up this country. In every single world war, we've been the first to the front line. During the pandemic, First Nations led that, and now even against Trump, we're all united against Trump's illegal tariff, and we stand with Canada. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we create a better country for everyone, including especially First Nations children on reserves that sometimes you look that don't have basic things like running water or proper roads, or access to health facilities like every other Canadian does. So I know that they're uncomfortable conversations, but they're the truth, and we have to make sure that everyone in this country is moving forward together.
Do you feel as though, I listened very carefully to what everyone was saying, and the contention from the Prime Minister seemed to be like, we have a duty to consult, certainly. That will happen as soon as something is deemed a major project, or, in order to deem something a major project, or if there is, in this case of the MOU, a proponent, then at that point there will be consultation. Do you feel, National Chief, that any of that consultation should or could have been done prior to this process unfolding?
Oh, absolutely. I think you can always do things better. You've seen C5 ram through over 20 days in June, and I feel for Canadians, and I feel for environmentalists, and I feel for First Nations. I think that when we work on bills or MOUs, I think if you want to go further than that, then include more people in the tent, hear the diversity of the views of all Canadians, including First Nations, and I think that we'll go farther that way. So could something have been done ahead of time? Well, if there is to be projects that are built, I hope that whomever, especially in those traditional territories on whose lands First Nations, it's coast to coast to coast, that interaction with First Nations is happening already, and engagement and discussions are happening with First Nations on the ground.
And what is your advice to government as they embark on those processes?
Well, I think committing to close the infrastructure gap, committing to make sure that First Nations children on reserves, look, we've got schools right across this country that are overcrowded, and we want to make sure that we give our kids the best that they can be, just like any other Canadian. We want to make sure that our children have access to clean drinking water, that they have access to a safe home, that we have policing services just like anywhere else. I know that the Prime Minister spoke about that today. And we want what Canadians have for our kids, a good, good jobs and clean drinking water and good education at the end of the day, right? That our kids go on to university and college and do well in life, and we want to get there together.
Can you elaborate, if possible, on how that would factor into the meeting that will take place? And you had mentioned it off the top that that's something that you had championed. The Prime Minister announced during his address today that there would be a First Ministers meeting, but with Indigenous people at the table, Indigenous leaders at the table, something that has not happened in a very long time, and that the agenda would be dictated, right, by you and your colleagues. Can you explain, I guess, what you're hoping that meeting can accomplish and what you read into the historic significance of it?
Well, you look at the federal government as a whole, like every minister in the Canadian government has a federal, provincial, territorial meeting. Even those exclude First Nations, however they happen. And when it comes to Indian affairs, our Indigenous services, as they now want to call it, they don't have that. And so you end up with problems with the provinces and the feds pushing the issue of First Nations back and forth, back and forth. Why don't we just sit at the table and just work out some of these issues? It's so simple, right? And yet it's so difficult, and it never happens. So
if I have just about a minute left, but if you were to identify what are the main three things, and I think you've covered most of it. If you what do you want them to pay attention to when you have their attention in that moment?
Absolutely. Look, I think that we need to invest in education, giving our kids tools to to advance in a new and changing and evolving world. Also, of course, to fix the clean drinking water once and for all. And making sure that we reintroduce the water legislation and policing in First Nations communities, like access to making sure that First Nations policing, as an essential service, because right now it isn't. And again, provinces and feds like to push that policing issue back and forth, back and forth. We're under-policed on reserve and over-policed off reserve.
Okay.
So I'll leave it there.
I will leave it there as well. Thank you, National Chief. A pleasure to host you in studio as always. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.